Hello and welcome to Road America. Following last weekend's fantastic race at Sebring, the Batteries Not Included Championship heads north here to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin for round number 10 here on the GSRC. And here to bring you all the action live is myself, Samuel Ryman, along with Johan van den Velde. Behind the scenes doing all the button pushing is our director Sean Ambrose, and he is using camera sets provided by Dougie Beard. Johan, last week we were at Sebring and next week we're going to Watkins Glen, but of all the US-based tracks that we don't see F1 cars on in the real world, but we do here on iRacing, I would say that this track, Road America, is definitely one of the more enjoyable circuits to drive on here in the States, and also it can produce some fantastic battles.
Absolutely, Sam. Today we race at Road America, located near Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. After World War II, road racing became more and more popular in the US, and in 1950 race cars took the asphalt for the first time in Elkhart Lake. And these races were hosted on public road courses, and after 3 years of racing, it was banned after a crash killed a spectator. Racing had to be made safer, not longer on public road courses, which led directly to the track we see today, Road America. Personally seen as one of the best racetracks the US has to offer, this circuit was constructed in 1955. One of the things that it makes it so special is that it's one of the only tracks in the world that still uses its original layout, a 6.5 kilometer course with 40 corners and many elevation changes. These corners will play a big factor in the race today, as Road America hosts a collection of very long straights. The drivers will have to be perfect on braking and corner exit to maximize their speed, otherwise they might very easily become a sitting duck for the drivers behind. And to see how you do this, let's hop on board the GSRC Formula 1 car for a lap around Road America.
All right, we've got Harrison Finch and the GSRC McLaren, so let's do a lap around Road America. Coming up to turn 1, expect the draft on the straight to be the best time to pass, because you'll see the braking into this first corner comes very late. Outbraking someone will take some extreme bravery. From out of there, it's a very short burst down to turn 3, which is one of the more important corners to your lap. Be sure not to mess up the exit, because you're now on the run down the Moraine Sweep. This not only includes the DRS zone, but also one of the best places for a pass into turn 5. The difficult thing about this left-hander is that it's a downhill braking zone, so you often see drivers overcook it and slide wide. After that, you'll climb back uphill into 6, where the crest right where you want to brake will certainly catch a few people out. Then you're thrown into turn 7, which surprisingly, even in this F1 car, needs a big lift to make it through. That takes you into the hurry downs, where sometimes you might find drivers pulling a surprise attack into turn 8. The car then swings into the long, patience-trying carousel. Incredibly, the car won't get below 120 miles an hour. This is another very important corner exit, because your second DRS zone follows the kink. Speaking of which, this is another spot where you'll see a tiny lift out of drivers to make it through. Now as the DRS flap opens, you'll have to deal with the winding nature of the kettle bottoms. That makes figuring out when the driver ahead will take a defensive line a bit confusing, but Canada Quarter still makes for a very popular overtaking spot. Be careful not to put it in the gravel on the exit, and then you'll need a big lift for the blind turn 13. Right away, you're braking for the final corner, where a wheel spin or a bad exit will bite you badly. The car climbs back up the hill on the front stretch, and hopefully, if you kept it all together, you've now finished the lap around Road America.
Unfortunately, when we went to do the lap guide, the noise ordinance was in effect for the track, so we had to bring the McLaren F1 car along. But now we got these screaming Williams F1 cars getting set to go around for 31 laps here at Road America. Who are the drivers behind the wheel of them? Well, let's take a look at some of our top contenders throughout the season as we take a look at our point standings. And such has been the story of the second half of the season. Definitely, if you followed real-world Formula 1, Clayton McLeod has kind of been the Sebastian Vettel of this season, which is easy to remember because he's racing a Ferrari out there, a Ferrari liveried car. He did very well at the start of the year, but has fallen off of a cliff as we've gone deep in the season. And not only has that lost him the championship lead to who you could say has pretty much been the Lewis Hamilton of the season, the Joseph Fabian, but also now second up in the points is Antonio Pavetta. And Pavetta has been getting very strong finishes as of recent. And I'll tell you right now, Fabian is here today and McLeod is here. However, unfortunately, there is no Pavetta here today, at least not as of this moment, as our 10-minute qualifying session gets underway. So maybe McLeod could take back second in the standings. There you see last week's winner at Sebring is there, fourth in the points, Floris Bichar. And rounding out our graphic there, all the way down in 10th in the points, is Ziga, who has also been coming on strong in the second half of the season. All of those drivers here today, with the exception of Pavetta. And what are they going to be up against today, Johan?
Yeah, this is round 10 of our 12-round batteries not included championship. As you could just see in the standings, and once again here, 4 watermarks behind it, which means that there's 4 drop weeks. Roughly said, that means that the best 8 result of each driver will be used to calculate their final championship standing. The race today here at Road America will be 31 laps, and the drivers will have a 67% fuel limit, which means that they have to make 1 pit stop in the race. There's no incident cap, but the admins will keep a look on it to see if drivers are not abusing it, so you cannot freely go off track and win extra speed with that. And the points will be determined by the official iRacing point method, which looks at the amount of drivers that are participating and the strength of field. And looking at the strength of field, it is almost 2,500 today, so a little bit more than we saw last week, which means that the drivers will get more than 100 points if they win the race today.
But also, Johan, every single position today is going to be critical. When you have a high strength of field like that, but not a lot of drivers, I believe we have just 15 cars here right now. That means, 15th, last place is always going to pay, 10, 20 points at best. And the winning this race is going to pay about 200 points or so. So let's just use those as estimates. That means every position is going to cost you about 15 to 20 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an extra factor that probably the drivers will be thinking about as they race here today. Every position that you lose will just lose you 20 extra points in the championship. Now, of course, that's offset maybe a little bit by drop weeks and the likes like that, but it will be more important than, for example, last week when we saw a little bit more than 20 drivers, to really make sure that you have a high finishing position at Road America.
And this is one track, Johan, where you can kind of dictate your own race a little bit. I mean, next week we're going to Watkins Glen. As we mentioned, there's a lot of close walls around there and strong draft, and there's a strong draft here as well, a strong slipstream. But the fact that there's wide open spaces here, there's overtaking opportunities. If you're fast here at Road America, as long as you keep your stuff together, you can be in control of your race and come out with a good finish. The biggest hazard the drivers are going to have to deal with is the opening lap, because you see, as we're watching Floris Bichar work his way down this long front straight right now, Turn 1 is a heavy overtaking opportunity. Turn 3, which is essentially what they call Turn 2, is a heavy overtaking opportunity. And Turn 5, which is essentially what they call Turn 3, but it's called Turn 5. At the end of this straight that Bichar is on right now is also a heavy overtaking opportunity. So, once you get through the first lap, if you can survive that first lap, you do have a sense of control around here, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a lot easier to make overtakes stick here compared to a lot of the other tracks we go to. But what you say about lap 1, that's really something I completely agree with you. The drivers really have to watch out in lap 1, maybe more than in other tracks, because turn 1 and turn 3 are already like hard 90-degree corners where the cars will just accordion towards each other. But at turn 5 and turn 6 after the little bridge as well, those are both 90-degree left-handers where the cars will completely bunch up towards each other, and it's very easy to lose a front wing, to get a knock, to get spun around, and you really have to stay out of that mayhem if you want a good finishing position here, and if you don't want to damage your car already at the beginning of this 31 lap race.
And a good way to get a good finishing position is to get a good starting position, and that's what Evan Lathoris just did. We saw on screen he put in the fastest time in qualifying so far, just a few hundredths up on Scott Newton, as we watch Thomas Ziga try to improve his time. Going back to Evan Lathoris, though, as Ziga jumps up a spot, we've seen him here before in GSRC racing behind the wheel of the McLaren. We haven't seen how fast he can go once you take the batteries out of the car and put him in this 2009 Williams Formula 1 car, but so far he's proven he's got some good pace.
Yeah, and he was already having good pace in practice when he was less than a tenth slower than Joseph Fabian. He finished on P2 in practice, so that really shows the speed that F1 has so far. Joseph Fabian, however, hasn't set a qualifying lap time yet. He was coming out of the one of the last corners in his in his first flying lap. He spun it into the wall, and especially with a lap that takes 1.5 minutes, more than 1.5 minutes, that's more than 3 minutes that you kind of have to take more to really get another outlap going and another flying lap. So it will be a while before we see Joseph Fabian putting a time on the scoring sheet.
Of course, there's always a problem you have here at Road America, is if you do make a mistake on the qualifying time, you've got a long time to wait, as Evan Lathoris just improved his pole time. You've got a long time to wait before you get another hot lap in. That's not as much of a concern here with these Formula cars, though, I don't think, because they're so fast. A lap around here just takes a tick over 1 minute 30 seconds, and with a 10-minute qualifying session, you've still got time to regroup, get back out there, do another lap.
That's absolutely true. We see Floris Bizar on screen now. This will be his second time lap. In the meantime, he went, his third time lap. In the middle, he went into the pits to refill his car, get some new tires. Coming over the start finish line. Sorry, this is still his out lap. The Dutch driver is currently sitting in P3. He has a 1:35.1. It's his quickest lap time. He has to win 0.6 of a second to challenge F1 Force for pole position time. Joseph Fabian is coming over start finish as well at this moment. He actually goes by Floris Bizar. He does a 1:34.8, 100 slower than Scott Newton. The Australian has to settle for P3 for now.
However, even with Bizar back and forth on the grid, that's where he won from and led out of the opening sequence of corners just 1 week ago at Sebring. So don't let that deter you, Bizar fans. He can definitely still get the job done here from fourth on the grid at Road America. Right now, Lathoris, Newton, Fabian, Bizar, your provisional top 2 rows, but still 2.5 minutes left of qualifying before the checkered flag comes out, and then there'll be a little bit of added time for drivers who are out there on the hot lap. Let's not discredit Clayton McLeod, back in 5th on the grid right now, still trying to get his name back into this championship. Even if he is a bit too far back for Fabian in points, he could give Pavetta a good run for second in the standings, especially, as we mentioned, with Pavetta not being here today.
Yeah, Clayton Lathoris is still going strong. He's coming over start finish line now. Let's see, he's actually on a flying lap now. This is one of his out laps. The Australian is continuing. We're having a strong Australian or Oceanian lineup today with both Lathoris and Scott Newton on the front row. Both drivers still quite close with each other, with Joseph Fabian behind. One of the things you were just mentioning, Sam, was that start. How Floris Bizar time and time again shows how good he is when the green light shows and the race gets underway. And that advantage of him will be, even as we see Joseph Fabian, by the way, go to the quickest lap so far, go to pole position on top of the screen. That skill to be able to have really good starts will be extra important here, because the run from the start finish line until turn 1 is bigger than, for example, in Sebring. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Floris Bizar, like we've seen several times already this season, go from P4 maybe to even P1 before he reaches turn 1.
Newton just took second position where he was already, but improved his lap time. Still wasn't able to take a top spot, which was now being held down by Fabian. Lathoris, who was a provisional pole sitter at the start of the session, has since faded back to third. And now there's also a new driver in 5th place. Thomas Ziga has got his name up there ahead of Clayton McLeod. And we'll give you a full grid rundown in just a few moments here once the qualifying session comes to its conclusion. Watching Evan Lathoris right now, actually. He's working his way through the final turn, the run up a hill. He's coming into the pits. I don't think he'll have enough time to get another hot lap in.
No, I don't think so either, but the drivers can still complete the lap if they get under the start-finish line before it runs out. Floris Bizar will be one of those drivers who just starts another flying lap going to the start-finish line. Who actually gets held up there by Joseph Fabian, who came out of the pits, so that's the run over for the Dutch driver. And I wanted to say Joseph Fabian actually is really getting everything out of his car. His qualifying lap, he's 0.02 of a second quicker than he was in practice. So the UK driver is really giving it everything he's got and getting the maximum out of his Williams machine.
Two drivers still out there on the hot lap. They're both in Ferrari liveried cars, and one of them only just joined the session, so hasn't had any practice time, and that's Christian Schmidt. And I take that back, he's actually on an out lap here. And the other driver, Clayton McLeod, just had an incident. I don't believe anyone else out there is going to be on a competitive hot lap. So let's go ahead and start running down our grid order. And on the front row is going to be Joseph Fabian edging Scott Newton when it was all said and done by 1/10 of a second.
On row 2 it is Evan Leforas. We've seen new in this series. He starts the race for the first time in P3, but he is being flanked by the Dutch driver, the winner at Sebring, Floris Bizar.
Starting in 5th position will be Thomas Ziegler. Clayton McLeod will be starting to his outside in 6th place.
Stefan Henkel was having a good qualifying out there. He starts on the inside of row 4. He's being flanked by Robert Grosser, who starts in P8.
And then rounding out your top 10 will be Michael Overbay and Marcus Dresdal.
Fabian Jungbloed is a driver we've seen in several other series. He starts the race just outside of the top 10. He's being flanked by David Wall Jr.
Jay Fields and Reed Miller will round out row number 7.
The last row of the grid is Emmanuel Gomez Esteban, and he starts alongside Christian Schmidt, who's the only driver who didn't manage to set a qualifying time.
That's what I thought too, Johan, because he crossed the start-finish line after the checkered flag had flown. However, the added time that they added might be just enough for him to get back around and screw up the whole qualifying order that we just read out. I don't think so, though. We're running into the last 10 minutes of a qualifying session. He's only through the last turn. No, he's going to fall just a few seconds short. So, unfortunately for Christian Schmidt, I think he'll be starting from 16th place. It's just a few seconds short at the end there. But now the cars are going to start getting gridded up. And even though it's Joseph Fabian and Scott Newton on our front row, I can never take my eyes off of Floris Bizar here for these starts.
Yeah, I think so either. The Dutch driver has shown how quick he is when the race gets underway. Every single race he has participated in. So if I'm a betting man and I have to put money on who leads into turn 1, I would put my money on P4, Floris Bizar.
But the thing is, even though it's a very long run to that first corner, this isn't the widest of tracks. And he got away with a 3-wide move last week at Sebring. I don't know if you're going to be able to pull a similar move here at Road America without risking contact with one of the front starters.
That's a very good point. He really has to make it clean, but he does have the advantage to really get it done before turn 1. However, we're in round 10 of the season. Those drivers should learn more and more how you start well in this Williams Formula 1 car.
Just waiting for our pole sitter to get here on the grid. Joseph Fabian taking his time, maybe wanting to save as much fuel as he can and not idle there on the grid while we're getting ready for the lights to come up. We've got about 30 seconds before gridding time is over, and then by then, if you're not on the grid, you have to pit stop. I'm sure we're just looking here at Fabian taking his time, but no, the lights are up. Joseph Fabian not going to start from the grid. Scott Newton leads him away, and once again a great start by Bizar, but he is crowded out. He would have had to lift a little bit there. He's still trying to poke his nose in the middle of Scott Newton as they go through the first corner.
Oh wow, 4 wide almost behind him. Floris Bizar couldn't take a stick though. Takes a little look at the inside there of Scott Newton, side by side for turn 3. It's the Dutch driver on the inside, the Australian on the outside. They're teammates together, they're side by side, but look at them behind. There's Clayton McLeod trying to find a way, threading the needle there for P2. cannot find a way. The Canadian has to slow down, give way as they brake for turn 5. On the outside now is the Dutch driver, and he cannot make it stick. He has a little bit more momentum, but it's 2 corners to the left now in a row, and Scott Newton consolidates that second position.
So Evan Lathoris checks out at the start. Scott Newton holds on to second, as you mentioned there. Bishan, McLeod, Ziege, and Dresdel has gotten off to a great start. You saw some contact at the back coming out of first turn. We'll get a replay on that. And to confirm, Joseph Fabian has actually disconnected from the server for the start there. I still don't think he's out on the racetrack right now. This could be a huge point swing here for Clayton McLeod, with Fabian not making the start from pole and also Pavetta not being here.
Absolutely. Well, what Clayton McLeod really now has to do is focus and make sure he doesn't make any mistakes, and he has a strong finishing position in the top 5 at the moment. He's not being put under pressure by Thomas Ziege, but Thomas is one of the rising stars. He hasn't won a race yet this season, but he scored several podium positions. He's getting stronger every race we do.
Now, it's worth noting as as Lathoris comes across the line to complete lap 1 with Newton behind him, Bichard in third, that Dresdel, who has jumped up from 10th on the grid and now runs in 6th place, runs a similar livery to Bichard. There's a reason for that. He is his teammate over at Gap Racing, and maybe he's employed a similar strategy here, Johan, where he has a lighter fuel load or has a bit of a car setup that makes it good off the starts, because it seems to be a theme with that team.
I think that Gap Racing maybe just practices race starts like 50% of the time, because both those drivers, both Flores and Marcus, had great starts. Marcus was actually one of the drivers that made it almost 4 wide when the green flag dropped. He had to go all the way to the pit wall and actually got several positions doing so. And the Scandinavian driver, as you can see at the moment, is just following the rest of the field, having a good one so far.
All right, so Joseph Fabian did reconnect and join the race. He's still on the lead lap, but very far behind. After our lap 1 carnage, we've already lost David Wall Jr. and Fabian Jungbluth has made an unscheduled pit stop. He'll still have to pit for fuel later on. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened here at the start, Johan, because there definitely was some carnage back in the field heading into turn 1.
Yeah, we go to a replay of that moment. It kind of started with Michael Overbay suddenly having to brake. You can see it in the back of the screen. Michael Overbay had to brake suddenly. That sent Stefan Henkel also to lock up. Carsman.
Yeah, we're going to get another angle here, give us a better view.
Yeah, we go to a new replay of that. But as I was saying, Stefan Henkel was checked up as well. So 3 cars went into turn 1. And David Wall Jr. was the one who got the worst of it. He got looped around there, as you can see, in the middle of the screen now. Several drivers all going side by side. A little tick on the rear of his car there, looped it around, and Fabian Jungbluth just collected them. And David Wall Jr. is the only driver who retired because of that crash.
As we catch up with our leaders here, skip over to our race leader, Evan Lathoris, who has pulled out about a second lead. Of course, it doesn't mean anything in this series other than you have a second lead. There's no DRS you have to worry about in these 2009 F1 cars. You could very well be mistaken for thinking that Joseph Fabian is the leader of this race, because Evan Lathoris has a near identical paint scheme to him, except for Lathoris has a bit of a blue trim, whereas Fabian has a red trim, and that's because they are teammates over at VRT.
Heavy battling we just saw between Thomas Ziege and Marcus Gestel. The Scandinavian didn't only have a good start, but he also has good pace at this point of the race. He's really putting the car in front of him, the DS driver, under more and more pressure. He tried to move on the inside of turn 5. Here once again, he just take a little look in Canada corner. He actually got by him in turn 5, but he couldn't stay in that position. He got overtaken back again in turn 6. But the gap between Thomas Ziege and the driver in front, Clayton McLeod, is just increasing because Marcus is putting so much pressure on him. As I'm saying that, Marcus Gestel is actually making a pit stop already.
This seems way too early to be scheduled.
Yeah, way too early. I'm actually looking now to see if maybe he had a little bit of damage last time around. No, he didn't. But it could also maybe explain a little bit how his race was going. Maybe he just started the race on qualifying fuel and forgot to fuel his car up before the race started. But this will mean that Marcus Gestel has to make 2 pit stops to make it until the end of the race.
That would not be and he overshoots his pit stall, add even more insult to injury there, because that is not the first time we have seen that here on iRacing, that drivers forget to top off our fuel. Of course, that might not be the case. Who knows? Maybe he's playing a two-stop strategy. Although that wouldn't really make sense. This isn't the most abusive track on tyres. And also, if we take a look at our weather, as Christian Schmidt comes in as well. If we take a look at our weather, it's not the hottest conditions ever, Johan, and that's because it's early in the day here.
Yeah, exactly. It's only 29 degrees Celsius track temperature, 85 degrees Fahrenheit track temperature. Like you're saying, Sam, that won't hurt the tires that much. So I don't think this is a pit stop for tires. If I have to be honest, I think this is a pit stop from both Christian Smith and the other driver we just saw in, because Marcus Gasol, because they didn't put in their race fuel, but started the race with qualifying.
Meanwhile, our leaders coming in across the line to complete lap number 4 here. Evan Athoris continues to hold a little over second lead over Scott Newton. Floris Bichard, after a good start, he got a great launch as always, Johan. The problem is he just had nowhere to go with it, and had he been able to get the lead, I'd have a feeling he'd still be up there. But since he wasn't able to get the lead, he's kind of just riding on his own here in third place right now.
I mean, I wouldn't almost be sure if he could have kept the lead if he would have gotten it, because the race pace of Flores at this point is just not that hot. He's doing 37s. Last time around was actually a high 36, while the drivers in front are doing mid 36s or even low 36s. So it seems like Floris Bichard just cannot follow the pace that Evan and Scott Newton are showing at this moment. And the Dutch driver is really just consolidating his podium position at this point of the race. The quickest driver on track, however, is, surprise, surprise, Joseph Fabian. He might be driving one lap down in P15, but the UK driver is quick, however. Last time around he did a 136.0, that was 3 tenths quicker than Evan and Scott did. So Joseph Fabian is really almost like with a red mist in front of him, his eyes, just trying to recover as much as he can after he lost connection at the start of the race and he missed the chance that he had to start this race from pole position.
You can see him trying to unlap his way through the field. Yeah, I mistakenly said at the start of this broadcast I thought he still got back out there on the lead lap. Obviously that wasn't the case. He did fall a lap down. Currently running 15th of our 16 starters, with David Wall Jr. being our only retirement so far. So Joseph Fabian, who was meant to start on pole, back down there in 15th place. Drivers going in the other direction. Let's give a shout out to Reed Miller, who started in 14th place and has made up trouble for Trey Fields.
Yeah, sorry, trouble for Marcus Gestel. We saw him on screen there, who ran into the back of Manuel Gomez Esteban, trying to make an overtaking move in the King, but Marcus didn't anticipate Manuel being so slow in that corner. We go to a replay of that incident, and I think that Marcus Gestel has to come in immediately for another pit stop to repair some front wing damage, because he seems to struggle with a lot of downforce. He actually continues. Look at this replay, like he will certainly have damage after this running into the back there of Manuel. Both drivers being very lucky to not spin it around and both being able to continue the race.
Yeah, so we had 2 incidents going on at the same time, because I heard you react and I was watching Trey Fields at the time. He went off course and that cost him 9th place to Stephen Henkel, and he's fighting hard to try and get that back.
I think that Jay Fields actually might have gotten a little bit of damage on the right side of his car, because he did touch the wires ever so slightly, and that might have given his front wing a little knock. He has lost that position to Stefan Henkel, and he is now looking back to Marcus Gestel, who's 18 seconds behind him. But we've seen the pace that Marcus has in this race. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Scandinavian drive towards the rear of Lewis very, very quickly.
Let's check back in with our leaders, because there's been a big swing up front. Evan Lathoris had about a 1.5 second lead. Must have made a mistake though on lap number 6. His lap time was a second higher than normal. That has allowed Scott Newton to reel him in.
Yeah, there's a little bit of lap traffic in front of them in the form of Christian Smith, a Ferrari livery car. Will probably let them by on the exit of the run towards turn 5. Oh, Scott Newton has to brake extremely late to make it a 2-for-1 there, but he makes it stick. Christian Smith lets both of them by. Now I'm curious to see, Sam, how this will develop, especially since Scott is now in the draft of Evan Lafouras. Let's see if Scott Newton can use that draft to just stay close to the Australian.
Well, as they come through the left-hander here, turn number 8. By the way, Manuel Gomez Esteban has gone off again. And he's actually going to take a tow to the pits. His car's got handling issues. But keep an eye on this battle for the lead, because they just went through the worst place to be following a car, the carousel. That's that long right-hander that if you don't have all the air pushing your front wind down, you can really burn up your tyres and get pushed off of the racing line. But now is when Newton wants to be behind Lafouras, because if you can nail the exit of this corner, you can get a really good run that carries you all the way up this hill to the start-finish line and all the way back down the hill to turn number 1. However, Newton a bit too far back right now to make anything happen.
Yeah, I think so as well, but especially because the start-finish straight is uphill for a little while. Aerodynamically, it will just help you if you're the car chasing, and Scott Newton is profiting from that. There's all these long straights. He's not within 3-4 car lengths at this moment. The gap is a little bit bigger, but just because he's still in the draft, it will help him get closer and closer to Evan at this point. Both drivers last time around, still Evan was a little bit quicker. He won a few tenths of a second. I think that Scott Newton is still in the draft. As Floris Bizarre is also finding his way past Christian Smith. And while we were talking just before that, Manuel Gomez Esteban indeed did have a spin. He crashed into a wall, and I think his race is over, because after that crash, his car was crabbing over the grass, and I think that the Iberian driver has to retire for today.
So we're keeping half an eye on this battle for the lead. I'm also keeping half an eye on 4th and 5th place, because they're about to come up to Christian Schmidt, who goes off track. Schmidt hasn't been the easiest lap driver for these guys to get by, and I wondered if that would allow McLeod and Ziegler to close in for 4th and 5th. They've been getting a little bit closer now that Ziegler hasn't had to worry about Dresdel being behind him. However, that being said, Christian pulled out the way for these two drivers nicely, and the gap remains about a second between McLeod in 4th and Ziegler in 5th.
The driver who really hurt it because of overtaking Christian Smith, there was Floris Bizarre, who lost 1.5 seconds to Clayton McLeod, trying to get by lap traffic. And look at the gap between those two drivers now. Last time around it was almost more than 2 seconds, but then, as it stands right now, it's less than 1 second. So it seems like Clayton McLeod really has profited from trying to lap some drivers. He's just closing the gap down to a podium position. As Marcus Gestel, you could see behind these drivers, has come in and has come out for his second pit stop, presumably to repair that front wing damage that he suffered trying to overtake Manuel earlier in the game.
You've seen Dresdel come back out on the track here. His car doesn't look too bad, but he's been in a couple of times. And I'm keeping... Something very interesting is going on up front here, Johan. I think Joseph Fabian is intentionally backing off because he's having big connection issues right now. But I think Joseph Fabian is actually trying to get the leaders to come up and not necessarily lap him, but I think he wants to give Evan Lafouras, his teammate, a bit of a tow and help him pull away from Scott Newton. The problem is Fabian's connection is so sketchy right now, I'm not sure how much Lafouras is going to want to be behind him.
Yeah, that actually might, if that's actually what they're trying out, that could actually backfire tremendously. If, for example, Joseph Fabian starts blinking in the wrong corners and then suddenly give Evan Arapus in the middle of corners like the carousel, where you need all the downforce that you can have. But it certainly seems like Joseph Fabian is dropping down a little bit. Scott Newton, however, is closing down the gap. Last time around it was slightly quicker, 5 thousandths of a second than Evan Lafouras. He's just slowing down over start-finish line. Last time around it was only 6/10 of a second. I'm really curious to see if he's right with that, Sam, if Joseph Fabian actually opts to help his teammate, or if he's just not having the pace at this point of the race.
Yeah, ran a 1:37 last lap around, which was a second off for pace, but I did notice he had a bit of an off course. Evan Lathoris is really starting to slide that car around. I wonder if that's his tyres going off a bit as we're now 10 laps into this race. A scheduled pit stop window not too far away, but I've got to imagine these leaders are probably going to want to try and run it deep. And you see Lathoris going defensive. He's trying to break a slipstream. He knows Newton is a threat, and his car's dancing all over the place. Newton must be smelling blood in the water right now.
Yeah, I think Evan might have warmed up his tires a little bit too much there, and he's allowing Scott Newton to get way too close through the carousel. Great following from Scott Newton. Very quick corner here in the King. That's also one of the corners that's in downforce, but now towards Canada corner, he chooses to go to the inside, side by side, and the braking. Who can brake later? It is Scott Newton. He has the inside. He stays side by side there towards Thunder Valley. It's still side by side. Scott Newton has the edge. Now he brakes side by side. He is in front. Evan Lathoris cannot keep it there, and he loses the position for P1. And Scott Newton leading a race in the batteries not included championship once again.
And he's going to try and pull away from him up the hill. However, Lathoris has a really good run, and now it's Newton's turn to go defensive. Lathoris going to pull out to the outside. Newton staying defensive on the inside. Lathoris was a little bit late on the braking there, but I think he actually overshot turn 1, got out in the marbles a little bit, and it's going to cost him a bit of time on the exit of not only turn 1 but turn 3 as well. However, still within striking range as they go down to the hill to the hard braking point, but also great passing opportunity down here in turn 5. Lathoris would really have to do something aggressive if he wants to take a lead back here, and sure enough, he realises that he's too far back. It's early on in the race. Hold station in second place for now.
And now Evan Lathoris, can you follow through this, well, quote-unquote infield section where you don't have these long straights, and can you stay in the draft to drive once again to Scott Newton? It's really the question, because if you can stay in the draft, if you can stay as close, just a few car lengths separated between them, you can try another move once again in turn 1 and turn 5. But as they go through the carousel corner, look at the gap just increasing. It doesn't seem like Evan has the speed, and Scott Newton is just driving away from him.
Yeah, I think Newton also might have done a better job of taking care of his tyres in the opening stages. Haven't really gave a shout out to drivers sitting just outside the top 5 yet today. Robert Grosser, he started in 8th place, got up to 6th at the start. He's kind of just been handing out there. That's a lap car of Dresdel in front of him, who hopefully should pull aside from him through in Canada, and in fact actually goes off the track. It's not going to hurt him in incident point wise, so you don't get disqualified based on those here.
Well, with that off track, Marcus Gestel actually loses a position to Christian Smith, who was right behind him. And the Ferrari livery car of Christian Smith wins the position and gets to P12. Now, that's quite important what we said at the beginning of the broadcast, Sam. If you look at the amount of points that you get, one position can get you something like 20 extra points. That position that Christian Smith just gained might help him as they go. He lets, who is that? Michael Overbay by. Marcus Gestel is right behind him in turn 1 as they go towards turn 3. Marcus Gestel wants that P12 position back. He looks on the inside there, side by side, really close there in the middle of the corner. Marcus Gestel squirming once he puts the throttle down. But he is once again in the draft of Christian Smith now. Towards turn 5, he can have another great run there. Dives towards the inside. Christian Smith leaves it open. And under braking, it is Marcus Gestel that seals it this time around. And Marcus Gestel brings himself back to P12.
Yeah, great battle. I mean, like you say, it's for 12th place. It's a lap down, but a great battle for these two drivers going on for a lot of points right now. And right now, Dresdel has the upper hand, and Overbay was able to get by them. As we mentioned, trying to give a shout out to those drivers just outside the top 5. Overbay up 2 positions from where he started. But while this battle's calmed down a little bit, I tried to give a shout out to him early, and then we had some action on track. But Reed Miller is currently running in 8th place, and he started in 14th. He's having a good race going right there, and he's not exactly being challenged for that position either. He's got over half a minute to Dre Fields behind him in 9th.
Yeah, Reed Miller doesn't have the speed at this point to keep up with the drivers. Oh, he's keeping the gap the same to the drivers in front, Michael Overbay, Robert Grosser. But like you say, Sam, he doesn't have to worry at all from the drivers behind him. He's just out there driving his own race. He has to keep it clean, and he will come home with a nice haul of points in the top half of the field.
And our viewers may be wondering, okay, why we... this is great, giving shout out to these drivers back in 7th and all, but why aren't we keeping an eye on the battle for the lead? Well, that's because already in 2 laps, Newton has pulled out a 1.5 second lead over Evan Lathoris.
Yeah, we're looking almost at the pit window of this race with 13 laps done of the 31. Lap 15, lap 16, that's the halfway point. That's really when I would expect most of the drivers to come in for the pit stop. So let's see when Scott comes in, when Evan comes in, and also where Flores and Clayton come in, because that will decide who will be in front as they start the final stint of the race, and really the cards will shake out of who will end up on the podium.
P6 could be up for grabs in the not too distant future. Gross and Overbay have both been having kind of quiet races since the start. I mean, as quiet as you want to call the start, there definitely was a lot of drama going on into that first turn. But Overbay only just sitting about a second back of Grosan. Last lap around, he was a few tenths faster. Maybe this is a position that could come up for grabs during around the pit stops.
Yeah, and both drivers are really giving it them all. Both set the fastest lap of their races last time around. It was a 37.6 for Michael Overbay and a 37.9 for Robert Grosser in front. So it seems like Grosser is a little bit slower in his race pace at the moment. Let's see as they go over start finish line if they can keep up the pace. Robert Grosser goes a tenth slower. Michael Overbay also goes a tenth slower, but it means that Michael Overbay once again gets 3 tenths on Robert Grosser. So the American, like you say, Sam, is just closing down the gap 3 tenths at a time. With only 1.2 seconds between them, it will be not very long before he starts putting Robert Grosser under pressure, and he will give himself a chance to get away with 6th place position.
10th place, up for grabs in Canada corner. Stephen Henkel off the pace. I believe he got a bit of damage earlier. Fabian Jungbluth just sends it down the inside, takes 10th position away from him.
We can go to a replay of that overtaking with Fabian Jungbluth, who already made a pit stop earlier in the race. So he probably had some damage at this point, but he's really doing a recovery race. You can see him just run through the kink so well, immediately incredibly close to the gearbox of Stefan Henkel, able to use all the drafts, sending it to the inside. Stefan Henkel didn't defend it there, got the overtaking maneuver stick and got by. So Fabian Jungbluth, the German driver, is currently sitting in the top 10, but he already made a pit stop. So once he makes his second pit stop, which unfortunately he has to do, he will be stationary less long than his opponents because he already has some fuel in it, and that will allow him to probably close down the gap to Jay Friels a little bit quicker.
And when it rains, it pours. I think Joseph Fabian's race may have finally came to an end. Just a few moments ago, a solo spin, got it in the wall, took a tow from the pits, and I have a feeling that our points leader, who has had so much go his way this season, it looks like this race is not going to continue that trend today here at Road America.
Yeah, and as you say that, he actually left the session, but end of the race for Joseph Fabian, hard crash for him. He got the curbstone on the outside of the track, smashed the inside valve very hard, and like you say, this is music to the ears of the likes of Clayton McLeod, of Floris Bizarre, who can just close up the gap to Scott Fabian, who has to use one of his drop kicks here at Road America.
And even though Joseph Fabian has been on top form pretty much every single race he's been at, he hasn't been at all of them, so he can't really afford to throw away too many drop weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, when you have, like I said, when the rain pours, everything went worse for him. He really needed a good showing here, and unfortunately for him, it didn't work out. Whereas beside, we're looking at him at the moment, he's currently 6.8 seconds behind Scott Newton. Last time around, he did a 1:36.3. That's actually as quick as Evan Lathoris is.
And Lathoris is coming in.
Lathoris is indeed coming in, so he's the first one that blinks. The first one that makes his pit stop, probably also the driver that has to stay stationary the longest. Let's see where this all ends up after the pit stop. Everyone else in the top 5 continues, with Clayton McLeod getting to P3 and Thomas Seeger getting to P4.
Well, this can't surprise us too much. Evan Lathoris was third on the grid. We were keeping half an eye out on Bishar on that opening lap, seeing if he could make a jump from the second row up into the lead. It was in fact Lathoris who was able to use that, and now showing that a lighter fuel load may have contributed to that. Also, unfortunately, though, Lothaurus seemed to burn off his tyres, at least with comparison to Newton, in the early stages of this event. So maybe in the second half, he'll have to focus a bit more on time management. He comes out ahead of the lap car of Dresdel. He has a lot of clean track in front of him. There couldn't be better track position for Lothaurus than what there is right now.
Joseph Fabian just let know that he had some hardware troubles that basically didn't allow him to start the race when he wanted to. That meant that he had to miss the start and join later at the later point of the race. And the top 5, Thomas Seeger is actually closing this to better for P3 at this point because of the pit stop of Evan Lothaurus. Thomas Seeger closing in on Clayton McLeod, a little better for P3. Currently just a few tenths between the two. The Scandinavian is being put under pressure, but like we said as well, Sam, Clayton McLeod maybe...
Oh, Newton loses it on pit entry. A miraculous save to keep it out of a wall. Scott Newton, now leader, comes into the pits, gets it completely sideways. And we'll catch a replay here, but this could have gone south so quickly.
Wow, yeah, we go to a replay of that, Scott Newton. I don't know if that's actually just bad that he lost it there or just great car control that he caught it again, because that car was destined for the inside wall and he kept it out of it.
Now the big question though is, was he speeding? I mean, was he fighting for control so much that he may have not been able to hit the pit limiter in time? Well, he's coming out of the pits now. Let's see where he is in relation to Lothaurus. My guess is he'll be in front. Actually, he's in front by a country mile. I hope he's got enough fuel to make it to the end.
Yeah, it was a very, very short pit stop, it looked like, for Scott Newton.
Road America is not a track where you want to run out of fuel. Other drivers been making their pit stops. Robert Grosser, you see here, Reed Miller as well, also in these pit stall. A very long pit road here at Road America. That's two reasons you don't want to mess up your pit strategy here. One is that it's a long track with an uphill shot to the finish line, so if you do run out of fuel, you're going to struggle to get back. And two, if you do decide that, hey, I've got to come in for a second scheduled stop, it is a very, very long pit road.
Absolutely. I just, as we see some other drivers coming into the pit stop, I just had a look at the pit stops from both Scott Newton and Evan Lothaurus. It actually seemed like Evan Lothaurus had a slightly shorter pit stop, so not much between these two drivers. So it's really on track that Scott Newton made the difference. As we see, let's see Thomas Seeger currently making his pit stop. That's from P3. Clayton McLeod and Flores Beast are still continue though.
And that might explain why Ziegler was putting the pressure on Clayton McLeod there, and knowing that he was getting light on fuel. McLeod has opted to go out. He's going to have to hope for a hot lap while his fuel load is light, and maybe extend that gap to Ziegler during this round of pit stops.
Yeah, let's see how long Thomas Seeger actually is stationary, because there actually might also be something else. And maybe Thomas Seeger thinks that on track it's a little bit harder to make a move, but I'm quicker when I'm alone. So maybe he just makes his pit stop at this point of the race, tries the undercut on Clayton McLeod and get by with pit strategy.
So still waiting for Bichard and McLeod to pit. When Bichard pits, we expect him to come out in third place behind Newton and Lothaurus. Although, now that I'm starting to think Lothaurus had a slightly longer stop than necessary, maybe Bichard could be able to challenge him for that second position, because he was only hanging out about 5 seconds back of that battle for the lead that we've been following all race long between Newton and Lothaurus. I definitely don't think we should be counting Bichard out yet.
Yeah, and last time around he actually was quicker than Evan Lothaurus, so even if he cannot catch Scott Newton during this longer first lap stint, he actually might be able to close the gap towards Evan at this point. And he's still continuing, however, 136.7 going over the start-finish line. Now compare that with what Evan is doing. He's doing low 137s, so there's just few tenths every single lap that Flores Bichard is winning on Evan at this point of the race.
McLeod stays out as well. It's only 12 laps of fuel these drivers have got put in their cars. Overbay now coming into the pits. He had yet to make a pit stop, been running around 7th for most of the race.
Thomas Seeger almost losing control of his car just a few moments ago in Canada corner. He was trying to find a way past Marcus Gesdal, who he was lapping, and he actually wanted to go back to the racing line. We go to a replay of that incident. He wanted to go back to the racing line in Canada corner, trying to basically follow Gesdal through there, but Marcus Gesdal actually braked a lot earlier. You see here the aftermath, going through the corner, losing it there, sideways. Beautiful drift there from the Renault livery. But he kept it on track and he can continue. He's currently driving in P5 where he was earlier in the race as well.
And as Overbay comes out of a pits, it's going to be very close between Overbay and Grosser. Grosser just gets him in the race down to turn 1. And
these drivers have been within a few tenths of each other basically for the last 10-15 laps. And Michael Overbay probably hoped to get that position after his pit stop, but he was just inches too short.
Yeah, this was a way around. They were running before our scheduled pit stops. However, Overbay, as you mentioned, almost got Grosser, wasn't able to quite make it happen. And our round of scheduled pit stops are going to end with Bichard and McLeod coming in, and McLeod a lot closer to Bichard than what he has been most of the race. Now, I anticipate Scott Newton will take a lead from this race. However, I think these two drivers could be very close to Evan Lathoris for second place.
Yeah, especially Clayton McLeod on the braking going into the pit lane. He just wants so much terrain. That really allowed him to close up the gap to Floris Bizar. Evan Lathoris is screaming past him at the moment. He's overtaking now Floris Bizar. So that means that Floris will stay in P3, but the gap between him and Clayton McLeod is indeed a lot closer than it was before these two.
Yes, Evan Lathoris retakes second place. It's Scott Newton, Evan Lathoris, Bichard and McLeod. Now, of course, Bichard and McLeod are going to have newer tyres for the end of this race. Maybe they'll be able to cut into that gap. What it does mean is that McLeod has been able to pull out a gap over Thomas Ziegler, who continues to run in 5th position, but now he's not going to be pressuring him as hard for that 4th place. So I anticipate a good little scrap coming up for 2nd, 3rd and 4th before the end of this thing, but it's going to take a few laps to brew. So while we've got a moment here on GSRC, it looks like we've got a driver on the sidelines here, unfortunately, coming into Tukta. So let's bring Joseph Fabian, our points lead, into the booth. And Joseph, we know, that this is definitely unfortunate. That the good news is that you've had such a great season that I anticipate you'll still come out of this race with a points lead.
Yeah, it's, this is the exact same error that I had at Montreal, that I had to pull over to the side of the road. But unfortunately, this happened just as I was leaving qualifying and entering the race, and my buttons weren't working. So I obviously panicked, thought, what can I reset my wheel, reset everything, didn't work, dumped back in the server and was a bit too slow, and then I was just driving around angrily trying to catch up. But once I realised I was 2 laps down, there wasn't any coming back from that anyway. So but yeah, hopefully the points will be alright. I have 7 good finishes, and there's 2 races left. I for sure missed the next one, so it's going to come down to the last race for me to get a decent result.
It's unfortunate to hear you won't be at Watkins Glen. However, another driver who has shown up recently is your teammate there, Evan Lathoris. Have you been able to give him pointers, considering your lead in the championship? And I think this is the first time we've seen him in one of these Williams F1 cars this season.
Yeah, definitely. He tried to make that for a couple other races, but in Australia the time zones are pretty tough. But yeah, I think he pitted a little bit earlier than I expected him to, but I think he might be able to hold on for at least 2nd, maybe challenge Scott for the lead at some point. We definitely worked on setups together and traded lap time, so it was good having a teammate to practice with.
With Pavetta not here today, this is going to be a pretty decent points days for Bichard and McLeod, and then of course you just mentioned you're not going to be here at Watkins Glen. Who do you think is going to be your biggest threat in the championship at the finale, and who do you hope you're not fighting? Which driver is frightening you the most about taking the crown away?
It's a tough one. I mean, Clayton's had a lot of bad luck. He's had a really bad run for a month, and he's fallen down. But you know, if he gets, for example, a good result today and then finishes second too, he could really jump up there. Floris and Antonio, I don't think they're going to make it to 8 races. So while they're very tough drivers to race against, I don't think they'll have the points to catch me. But yeah, so probably Clayton's the one that I need to maybe have an accident.
Johan, you got anything you'd like to ask Joseph?
I was actually wondering, Joseph, welcome to the booth. You of course had your trouble today. You mentioned that it was the same kind of trouble that you had in Montreal. And I was looking like, how do you prepare yourself going forward? Are you actually looking to maybe do some switches with hardware or something that you don't have this happen to you again, or just praying that it won't happen again?
I've been in the market for a new wheel. Anyone got a wheel for sale? Send me a message. But you know, it's bad timing because I was thinking, oh, you know, the new Fanatec direct drive, but I don't like buying things without reviews, so I got to work out what I want to do. At the moment, I've just been essentially, you know, resetting my wheel and getting everything as good as possible just before the race, like just as I grid up. And actually, that was probably what caused the issue because I took my wheel off and it wouldn't go back on. So, you know, that's as much as I can do. Hopefully, maybe by the last race, so Monza, I could have something new. Otherwise, again, I'm sort of rolling the dice.
All right, well, thanks for coming to talk to us, Joseph. Commiserations on your retirement here today, but as we mentioned, still looking solid in the points, and we wish the best also for your teammate Evan out there, holding on currently 3 seconds over Floris Beach on that battle for second.
Yeah, thanks guys, and good luck, Evan.
And that was Joseph Fabian. So we've been keeping an eye on a couple of things during that interview, Johan. Evan Lathoris, as we just mentioned, continues to hold on over 3 seconds over Floris Bichard. But also Robert Grosser and Michael Overbay, we saw their drag race into turn 1 after the pit stops. Grosser and Overbay only separated by a second for 6th place.
Yeah, it's very close in that battle between Robert Grosser and Michael Overbay. Although the last lap around, it seems like Robert Grosser has a little bit more speed than Michael Overbay. It is just starting to increase the gap with a few tenths at a time. So let's see if Michael Overbay can find a little bit more pace and just put Robert more and more under pressure. These drivers also started basically in this order at the beginning of the race. Both of them have gained 2 positions since the start. Mostly because of the retirements of Stefan Henkel and Joseph Fabian. They're still very, very close as they continue. Now there's another battle going on, or at least it seemed to be shaping up. It's the battle for P2, the one between Evan and Floris Bichard, because last time around Floris Bichard gained 7/10 of a second on Evan. This time around it is Floris who has to give way 4/10, but I think that's mostly because of traffic. Floris Bichard had some trouble getting around Jay Friels. And I think that going forward, if Floris Bichard can continue to focus, he can maybe close down the gap to Evan and challenge him for P2.
And you saw at the back of your screen there, Jay Friels had a huge moment coming out of turn 3 and almost took out our 4th place driver, Clayton McLeod. Fortunately, was able to catch his car. McLeod gets by and there's no drama. But yeah, you mentioned it. Bichard definitely got held up by Friels last lap around. Friels, even though he's a lap down, still a decent performance, running out there in 10th place. But it does mean the battle for 3rd has closed up a little bit between Bichard and McLeod. It also means that Evan Lathoris might be feeling slightly more comfortable up there in 2nd place. So maybe the battle won't necessarily be for the 2nd podium spot in the closing 7 laps, but the 3rd one with Bichard about a second ahead of McLeod right now. 2 drivers who Joseph Fabian said he's not too worried about them fighting for the championship, but if they really want to have a go at it, they've got to try and get a strong result here, and the 3rd place is always a lot better than the 4th.
All the way on top of the field, it is still Scott Newton who is leading the pack. You're currently doing 1:36.4. He's really putting down the pace. Every lap he's doing lower and lower 36s. He's really consistent in that. Just winning almost a second last time around on Evan de Forest. The gap between P1 and P2 at this moment is 6.5 seconds. Scott Newton is just really in his own world. He's concentrated, putting the visor down and just focusing on driving quick and consistent laps and just making sure that he doesn't lose that first place position.
So Newton leading Lathoris, Bichard, McLeod and Ziege, your top 5. Grosser, Overbay, Miller, Drinkbluth and Friels, your top 10. And the other 2 cars still circulating the track are Gresdal and Henkel. And you mentioned Scott Newton out here leading 6.5 seconds. We've been talking about the championship a lot. The reason we're not mentioning Newton's name in that is simply because of attendance. When he has shown up, he has been very dominant. He's taken wins over Interlagos and Imola, and right now he's only about 6 and a bit laps away from picking up his 3rd victory of his batteries, not included championship here at Road America. He has a healthy 6.5 second lead over Lathoris. There's always a concern when we see such a variety in pit stop times, especially here at Road America, Johan, that there might have been drivers out there who haven't been able to save as much fuel as they would have liked. However, the gaps have been quite spread out up front. I have a feeling if any driver did short fuel, they've been able to save a little bit around here.
Probably, and maybe that's what Evan is doing at the moment. He was one of the drivers with one of the slowest pit stops. Last time around he lost 1 second to Floris Bichard. This time around it was only 0.3 of a second. There's only a little bit more than 2 seconds between P2 and P3 at this moment. And just Floris Bichard, cue the Jaws music, is getting closer and closer to the Australian. Scott Newton, however, I don't think he has to worry about saving fuel. He is one of the drivers that went in the longest from the top 5. And with a 7.1 second gap, he can save fuel all the way he wants now to stay in front.
It's also worth noting there's kind of a pattern here from Scott Newton's victories so far this season that we saw from Clayton McLeod at the start of the season when he was a dominant driver, and that's that he doesn't necessarily shine at the start of a race, but when things finally start to fall in his hands towards the end of a race and he gets lead, he just goes out and makes everyone forget that anybody else was ever a factor for this victory.
Exactly, the Canadian is now almost as quick as he was the very first race of the season when he actually won, because he's putting Floris Bichard more and more under pressure, and it seems like Scott Newton is the only driver who's quicker than Clayton McLeod at this point in the race. At the gap between them as they go through Canada corners, aptly named, there's less than a second between them, only 0.6 of a second. And means that Clayton McLeod 100% is in the draft of Floris Bichard at the moment. Actually might be able to put the Dutch driver under pressure before Floris can close down the gap towards Evan.
Well, we broadcast a lot of races here on the Global SimRacing Channel at this Road America circuit, and I know typically with the underpowered cars, the Mazda Miata, the Spec Racer Ford, we have had some fantastic drag races to the finish line coming out of a final turn. However, these Formula One cars are so fast and so powerful, and they get out of a final turn and up to the top of a hill where the finish line is so quickly that you can't really depend on a final corner attempt to make a pass. If McLeod is able to run down Bichard in these closing few laps, as soon as he gets to his rear wing, he's got to think about passing him. It's not like he can just sit there and strike on the final lap.
Exactly, 100% spot on. In lower powered cars you can probably wait a little bit for the last lap and then try to use the draft to swing by in the last time. But in these Formula 1 cars that's not able. So when you really get the connection to the car in front, you have to make that move ASAP and really make that move stick immediately. And we see this battle growing between Evan and Floris Clayton for P2, P3. There's another battle still going on, and that's the one for P7. Robert Grosser and Michael Overbay very close still in a battle for P6. Currently a second between them. Michael Overbay is a little bit quicker than Robert Grosser last time around. It seems like the American just tries to close down the gap as they go towards the end of the race when there's only 5 more laps to go.
It's going to be 4 laps left to go as they come across the finish line, which the second place train is right now. They're working their way over the hill, and now you see Scott Newton continuing to do what Scott Newton does at the top of your screen, setting a new fastest lap of a race, a 1:35.8 last time by. As a matter of fact, I think that's our first 1:35 of the race.
Yeah. Clayton McLeod actually did a 1:35.9 a few laps ago, but he just cannot keep that up. Last time around he did a 1:36 again, so he drops off. Scott Newton and Clayton McLeod are very quick at this point of the race, but the gap between Evan and Flores, it keeps decreasing, but at this point, Sam, it's in such a way that I don't think that Flores will be able to close down the gap if the pace continues like this, because it's 2/10 every single lap for the last few laps. With a gap of almost 2 seconds, that won't be enough to close down the gap and try and move for P2.
Well, but let's not forget, Evan Nathoris did not do a great job of taking care of his tyres in the first half of this race. Now, maybe he's been able to learn from that. I definitely haven't seen him sliding around as much during this stint. And also, he's been able to have an easier race. He hasn't exactly been battling anyone out there on position for position during these pit stops, so maybe he's got a nice handling car underneath him for the final few laps. However, the pressure will be coming from behind, with Bichar currently about 2 seconds back of him and McLeod currently about 1.5 seconds back of him. But if Lathoris can hang on without making any mistakes for the final 3 laps, I have a feeling he will be able to hold on for second. Just a matter of how much is he focused on what's going on out of his visor, which is absolutely nothing, and how much is going on behind his mirrors, which right now is absolutely nothing as well, because Bichar's still a solid 2 seconds back.
Yeah, the thing that you said, not making any mistakes, that we saw both Clayton and both Flores do last time around. Flores Bichar had a small lockup going into turn 8 and lost, I think, maybe 2 or 3/10 of a second, while Clayton McLeod went very wide through Canada corner and lost around half a second to a second to Flores Bichar, so both drivers dropping down a bit because of that. On screen at the moment we see the battle between P6 again. Michael Overbay is still putting pressure on Robert Grosser in front of him. Last time around, Michael Overbay had to give a tent to Grosser, so he cannot put the pressure on him as much as he was earlier in the race. Several colors between him. He really has to find something special to close down the gap and try to force Grosser into a mistake, because until this point of the race, Michael hasn't been able to really close down the gap and put the car side by side. He has been able to really find the connection, but the last thing that you need to really get close in the gearbox and try to put it side by side, that's not able yet for Michael.
But you see, Grosser is feeling the pressure. He was trying to break a slipstream on the run down the straight there to turn 5, and then actually he got a little bit of wheel spin on the exit of that turn that probably cost him a few hundredths of a second. So Grosser definitely aware and reacting to the fact that Overbay is not too far behind him. Grosser has been running 6th place all race long. He wants to finish there as well, but will he?
As we look in the battle for P2, last time around, Evan was 0.3 of a second slower than Flores Bichar with only 2 more laps to go. Going over start-finish line, there was 1.7 between these 2 drivers. So if they continued like they're doing now, there will be 1 second between them as they go over start-finish line. Flores Bichar has to find that last little bit of speed to try and force Evan into some defensive moves before the race is over. But Evan is just consolidating at this moment. He's driving exactly the pace he needs to really come home with the P2 position.
Hate to be that cynical person in the grandstands, but as of right now, with just 2 laps left to go for all of these drivers, to me, unless there's a mistake, given the way the aerodynamics work around here in the infield, I don't think we will see any changes for position. However, that being said, these drivers are on the edge of their tyre wear. You know, the tyres, all these tyres have been on for the second half of a race. They're feeling a lot of pressure. Those drivers in the championship know how much these positions are worth points-wise. And if anyone does make a lunge for it or makes an error of the exit of a turn, there definitely could be some big points implications if these positions do swing during the final lap, which Newton just comes across the start-finish line, and he is about to start as he heads off into turn 1 for the final time.
Clayton McLeod has really given up the battle. He was closing in on Floris Bizarre last time around when they approached Canada corner, but he once again made a mistake and lost quite a bit of time. The gap between him and Floris is almost 3 seconds. So that means that Clayton McLeod will finish on P4 if Evan and Floris don't make a mistake this lap.
Yeah, so the battle for third might be over. The battle for second, though, could definitely still be on. Bichar's closer to Lathoris than what he's been all race long. We're also keeping an eye on this battle for sixth, with Grosser holding on just a little bit ahead of Overbay. Meanwhile, Gresdal has had a spin on track. Fortunately, the rest of the cars able to avoid him. Don't need to go there. He's able to recover. Watching Bichar as they come downhill into turn 8, carousel the next turn. This is where Bichar's going to suffer. The air is going to be taken off of his front wing. He's going to have a hard time getting through this long right-hander. One driver who's having no such trouble is about 10 seconds up the road from this battle, heading into the final few corners, and that is Scott Newton looking for his third victory of the season. Not here for the championship, remember, but here to pick up the checkered flags, and he's about to add another trophy to his collection as he climbs up the hill, and Scott Newton is going to take a win here at Road America.
Floris Bizarre doesn't want to settle for P3, however, through the last corner now. He's really close to Evan Laforas, but Evan has a great run through the last corner, and Floris Bizarre cannot try a move there. He finishes on P3, while Evan comes home in P2. Clayton McLeod has a settle for P4.
Ziga will get fifth. Who will get sixth? Right now it is Grosser, and he has the advantage. Once again, they just came out of the carousel where Overbay would have been struggling with the aerodynamics. They have a nice run down to Canada corner here. Grosser still holding on with a bit of an advantage as they go into the heavy braking zone in Canada corner. The only opportunity Overbay is going to have now is a nice run coming out of a final turn, but I think he's just a little bit too far back as they go ahead. The dark slab of tarmac, I always use that as a braking zone. Grosser trying to break the slipstream, but I think that's unnecessary. He could just be doing a celebratory weave there because he is going to cross the line in sixth ahead of Overbay.
Yeah, the last driver on the lead lap is Reed Miller. That's a driver that's the hard charger of today, winning 6 positions out there, starting in P14, coming home on the lead lap in P8. So good run from Reed Miller, winning the most positions of any driver out here at Road America.
At the end of the day, the victor was Scott Newton, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk to him in just a couple of moments here on the GSRC. We'll also give you a full race rundown. Don't go away. Hello and welcome back to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, where we just witnessed the 10th round of the Batteries Not Included Championship here at Road America. And when the checkered flag fell, it fell on Scott Newton, first of all, 10 seconds before it did on Evan Lathoris, who brings home a second place finish in his debut to the season. Bishar was just 4/10 of a second back of Lathoris by the time they got to the line. And then Clayton McLeod, will he be able to salvage the championship, or is it a little bit too little too late with a 4th place finish? We'll find out in 2 weeks' time at Monza. Thomas Ziegler comes home in 5th place ahead of Robert Grosser and Michael Overbay. And rounding out the top half of our field and all the cars on the lead lap, Johan, was Reed Miller in 8th position.
Yeah, Fabian Youngblood wins 2 positions and comes home in P9 with Jay Friels rounding out the top 10. Marcus Gestel, that's a driver that we've seen several times on screen, making several pit stops in the race as well. Well, in the end, he finishes in P11 and he edges out Stefan Henkel by 1 position. Christian Smith is one of the first of the 4 retirees today. He comes home 14 laps behind Scott Newton in P13, in front of Joseph Fabian, the driver of the pole sitter of today, the championship leader. He didn't see this. He had some technical troubles, couldn't make the grid, and everything went from bad to worse after that. He's only classified in P14. Manuel Gomez Esteban comes home in P15, and the last driver who was taken out with a starting crash was David Wall Jr.
Alright, we got some drivers starting to come into the booth here, and first here was the driver who was third across the line, and that was Floris Bishar. Floris, another podium finish. You weren't able to do what you did at Sebring and take a window. How much did it hurt you kind of getting boxed out at the start there?
It hurt me significantly, especially when I noticed towards the end that I was actually catching up to Evan. But he was complaining about his wrist hurting when we were talking to each other after the race. So that might have something to do with me catching Evan as well. So it may or may not actually hurt me all that much. But yeah. It seems someone caught on to my starting strategy and boxed me in, and that kind of ruined that. But yeah, it was a good fun race. I have to say that.
Yeah, it's a kind of a narrow track here at Road America, especially for how fast it is. So we knew that was a risk for you at the start there. Now, how does this affect your championship? Because you've definitely been coming on leaps and bounds in the second half of a season and getting up and points. And you may catch us on the broadcast later, but Joseph Fabian says he won't be at next week's race at Watkins Glen. Do you think you're going to have a chance to battle him and the likes of Clayton McLeod and Pavetta also for this title?
Well, the championship's going to be kind of interesting for me because I've had so many drop weeks already. I think this is my 7th race, and I've had a couple of DNFs as well. So, well, there's 2 more races coming up. So I'm hoping that with the 2 missed races and the 2 DNFs, if I finish well in the next couple of races, I may or may not catch up to people. But I really don't know where I'm going to be at the end. It's towards the end of the season, we're all catching up to one another, and not just in the standings, but in pace as well. So it's going to be interesting.
All right, well, as we mentioned, next week we go to Watkins Glen. We expect another good start from you there, but we know, boy, turn 1 at Watkins Glen can always be crazy. So we look forward to seeing what you can do there.
Well, the nice thing about Watkins Glen, especially Turn 1, has a nice wide runoff, so you can actually, avoid a crash at least if you're on the outside. But the track is quite a bit wider, especially at the start, so hopefully that'll help me. But yeah, it was really narrow. I gridded up and I saw Evan being that close to me. It's like, I'm gonna have a problem, and I did. So, I'm gonna wait and see if people catch up and how to start this car, and hopefully the starts are gonna be a bit tighter. But I would really like to get past everyone again before turn 1, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right, well, congrats on the podium finish, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again after next week's race at Watkins Glen.
Thank you, and see you next week.
All right, well, that was our 3rd place finisher, Floris Bishar. And Johan, you've caught up with our race winner, Scott Newton.
Yeah, Scott, welcome to the booth. First of all, congratulations with your win out there. Now, just before we really dive into your race, I wanted to say we just talked with Floris Bissar, and he was mentioning that it was almost like people caught up with his good starts, and he felt a little bit boxed in at the start of the race. Now, he couldn't overtake you and Evan. Was it something that you almost did a little bit on purpose, try to really keep him behind together, or was it something that just happened naturally?
Hey, Johan. Naturally, Road America's tight down the front straight. So if you're not on the front row, you haven't really got much space to go unless like the car in front of either the front two cars have a really bad start. So luckily I got a decent jump, but I think that Joseph might have had connection issues, so that allowed Evan that would have been directly behind Joseph to get at least alongside. But I haven't actually checked the replay for turn 1 yet. So, but yeah, naturally, mainly it was just for me. It was just stay ahead. Luckily, I managed to do that throughout the course of the first lap because I saw that Floris was down the inside of me at turn 2, and luckily I was able to stay and maintain the whole type of turn 3, which allowed me to at least keep P2 at least for the first third of the first stint.
Yeah, because you got P2, then it was a little while that you stayed behind Evan, and then around lap 6, lap 7, you really closed down the gap towards him, and in lap 11 you got by him, and that's really probably the most critical point of the race, right? Because after that you were flying out there.
Yeah, definitely. Evan had really strong pace at the start of the race, so I couldn't really match him. I know that he was maybe 1 to 1.5 tenths quicker on that lap. Mainly due to the fact that I never tested my setup in dirty air, so I was a little bit more understeery than I originally planned. But also in testing, I never got past 28 kilos of fuel in the stints, because once I got past, I think it was about lap 8 or 9 in the stint. Yeah, the set was my race car for defending rather than overtaking. So I knew that if I did it for overtaking and I was in the lead, I would have just got pretty much minced down the straight. So I knew that I had to at least try to defend. Luckily, I was able to hold Evan off, at least defending when I overtook him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got by him, you stayed in front of him, and you finished in front of him with quite a healthy margin. Now, looking at the championship, you are together with Joseph Fabian, the driver who's won most races this season. You've got 3 races behind your name. Next week is Watkins. Week after that is Monza. Are you confident that you can tally a few other races up behind that? Are you confident you can win a few more before the season is over?
Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping to make it 4 out of 5 at least. 2 rounds remaining. Sebring wasn't a great round for me, you saw, crashing halfway through the race. But yeah, Sebring's not a fantastic track for me. So yeah, but coming to Watkins next week, mainly just got to avoid the turn 1 landmine, and you'll be pretty right, I think. So yeah, as long as I don't hit that and I'm consistent like I have been over the last 3 races that I've managed to win, yeah, it'll be certainly strong for at least a podium.
Very good. Well, congratulations with another victory, at least today here at Road America. That was Scott Newton, our race winner today here in the Batteries Not Included Championship. Now, in the meantime, Sam, you've caught up with another podium finisher today.
Yeah, Evan Athoris, congratulations on the 2nd place finish. I believe this is your first time we've seen you this season. How much experience would you say you have with this Williams F1 car?
How are you guys? What a race! This is the first time I've ever raced this car, so not a lot of experience, but I do race the MP4 quite often. And now that that's gone fixed, I was looking for something different, and here we are. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Now, towards the end of the first stint, when Scott Newton took the lead from you, we saw you sliding around a little bit. Were your tyres starting to go off, and did that impact how you approached the second half of the race?
Yeah, it was really interesting actually, because a short way through the first stint, I was actually building from Scott. And then the car was just sliding around the corners, and I was playing with a diff to try and sort it out. But I think I may have overdriven the car slightly, and it caught up with me in the end. Yeah, not really sure how to fix it, but yeah.
Was the second place what you were after today? I mean, like you say, this is your first race with this car. You happy with the podium, or were you hoping you could take a win after you got the lead at the start?
I actually wanted to win, but I'll take the podium. I'm really happy. The race was brilliant. I had a lot of fun. It was close at the end with Floris coming up behind me. It was just really good. I had a great time.
All right, so what about our last two races for this season? We're going to Watkins Glen next, and then we wrap it all up at Monza. Think we'll see you back for those?
I reckon I'll be at Monza. It's actually 3 a.m. in the morning here, so I don't really want to do too many of them. But Monza is a fun track. I'll probably be there for that for sure.
All right, well, congrats on an impressive debut here today, Evan, and we look forward to seeing you back.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, and with our 3 podium finishers there, that's going to wrap up drive interviews actually this evening, as we've got the Camel GT Championship coming up in just a few moments here on the GSRC, so we hope you stick around for that, and we hope you also tune in to the GSRC, the Global SimRacing Channel, next week for round number 11 over at Watkins Glen. We would like to thank Clayton McLeod as well as all of the organisers and the competitors of the Batteries Not Included Championship for coming out here today and putting on a great show. We would also like to thank all of the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcasts, and there you can see them all listed on your screen. Additional thanks goes out to Eric Ekholm and June Lalonde to provide us with our music. See the screen for how to get hold of more of their great work. Thanks to the team today, Johan, Sean and Dougie. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, you can visit us at globalsimracingchannel.com. We're also on social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at facebook.com/globalsimracingchannel, and Instagram at GSRC_gram. All of the upcoming races for our other series are listed on screen, so check those out. Mark them down on your calendar and don't miss another second of exciting racing action. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.